Good afternoon, everyone. It is really hard for me to watch myself. I just can't stand to see myself on video. Yeah, I kept doing this. But thank you for inviting me to today's series. I've been involved with the organization for 40 years. I was forced to be a volunteer for like 7 years before I became on the payroll. My mother, she founded this organization, just like the video said, because she heard that the South Side of Chicago had the high incidence of cancer than any other area within the city of Chicago based on zip code. And ours was #1. And considering that my father died of a progressive cancer, he was diagnosed March of '69, and he died that following June. And she wanted to know why, and she started having conversations with many of the residents in the community. Either they was in remission, or they was suffering with it, or someone in their family member had passed away. And what really struck her at that particular time, it was 3 young girls who lived on the same row. It was, we have, our row houses is maybe like 12 apartments on one row. And out of 3 of those houses on that particular row was 3 young girls at the age of 2 years old. They had multiple cancer. They didn't just have one cancer or dual cancer. They had multiple cancers, and they didn't live past the 5 years old. And they were small enough to fit into what she said as a dresser drawer. And that's how small they were at the age of 5 years old. And she said, something is not right about this. So she started calling around in Washington, D.C., and she connected with a group called the Environmental Action Organization at that particular time. And they referred her to 2 toxicologists in the city of Chicago, Dr. Reginald Jones and Dr. Robert Ginsburg. And Dr. Reginald Jones, he was the director of the the Chicago Department of Health at that particular time. And he was really amazed to know that a widow from public housing was calling and inquiring about environmental issues. And when he really learned that she was a widow of 7 children that's living out there, he loaded her with all the information that she needed to know in regards to the related health issues in our community. Not only did she find out we had multiple different types of cancer, but there was a high incidence of lung problems, respiratory diseases in our community, because when we first started working on environmental issues, we had like 385,000 pounds of pollutant that was emitted into the air every day because of the industrialization of our community with the steel mills and the manufacturing companies and other chemical processing facility on the south side of Chicago. She met with Dr. Robert Ginsburg, who told her a lot about the industry side of the levels and the standards and a lot of the violations that occurred with a lot of those industries in our area. So we was able to challenge the IEPA, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, about the air pollution in our community. So they gave her a complaint form. She took the complaint form and made like 1,100 copies and went door to door to the community. And that's how we was able to learn about the multitudes of the different types of health-related issues and the cancer and the respiratory problems that we had in our community. But it was shot down by IEPA because it wasn't done scientifically and we didn't have the backing of an academic institution to verify, but it did send a signal. Now, we have to understand that the United States Environmental Protection Agency wasn't erected until 1969. And they was only mandated to regulate industry and to work with academic institutions. They had no jurisdiction on how to help and work with community that was impacted by these industries. So we thought that was very unfair because we're saying that we're just as more important as the industry, and we should be able to come to our US EPA to get this type of information. Not knowing that these same conversations was happening in different regions around the country about community engagement, the community right to know, community want information from EPA, but there wasn't given it because they had no mandate to work with us. So at that particular time, my mother started traveling around the country because she was just telling the story and her experience about how we was living in All Gilgard. Oh, I do want to say one thing. When I came around the corner here, I saw one of the halls here named is All Gal. And it was like, oh, that's amazing, All Gal, even though I know John Argyle was the one, he was a governor back in the 1940s who commissioned for my community to be built. And that's why his name, Argyle Guard. But I never found out who was Philip Murray Home, who was actually he was, but the most important is the first name. So anyway, so she got to running around and she learned about the other groups around the country that was fighting, and she happened to connect with Dr. Benjamin Chavis and Charles Lee. And that was in like in 1987. And then they published a report called Toxic Race and how to impact the community. I can't give you the exact name because it came from the United Christ Church, but it became a national publication about how black and brown community are affected by landfill uses and industrial facilities in their community. So at that particular time, all these groups around the country started coming together and started writing and pressing Washington, D.C. to open up the door. And because we was calling it environmental racism, and they wanted us to label it as environmental equity. So we came up with, we compromised with each other, and we came up with the term environmental justice. And we created 17 principles to environmental justice. And we presented those principles to the White House. And at that particular time, it was Clinton who that they presented these principles to, and he came up with Executive Order 12898, which allowed community groups and community to get this information from US EPA and to be able to get grants, to be able to get technical assistance. If it wasn't from the Executive Order 128, we'll still be trying to fight for inclusion and to get the information from US EPA. Also, as the executive order passed, they created the commission, the National Environmental Justice Advisory Commission. And within that commission, they created the Office of Environmental Justice. So now you have a commission that travels around the country to give the information and to listen to testimony from different community groups or residents around the country and make recommendations to the administrator how they should proceed with this action. But under the current administration, a lot of those opportunities that we fought to be able to get, and in particular around climate justice, has been rescinded by the current administration. And that's a real challenge for us, because one of the things that we have to understand is that these chemicals and everything that is being produced for our consumerism, because we got to take responsibility in some of this stuff too, because if it wasn't for a lot of the products that's being made today for our uses, we wouldn't be having a lot of the chemicals and the residuals and the waste that is generated from the manufacture of these things. Because over the years, I truly had learned that one of the things that whatever we generate waste. And that waste can turn into pollution depending on how we dispose of it. Because one of the things that I'm clear about is that pollution don't go to heaven, y'all. Whatever goes up must come down. And what do it come down to? It comes to our rivers, it comes to our homes, and we have to take some responsibility to affect those change. Now, I can't say that in my neighborhood, it's been an industrial area since the 1880s. But we're here in 2019. Technology and education and engineering and development has changed so tremendously that we need to keep up with it. But some people, some of our elected officials around this country doesn't see that because they resisted to change, but change is inevitable. Because as my mother used to call it, she said that if we don't do anything about the chemicals that we are emitting into the air and it's depleting the ozone, we're going to see a change in the weather pattern. She was saying this nearly 30 years ago. Today we call it climate change. And we seeing the impact, the negative impact. She even talked about is that where places where there used to be drought is going to be flooding. We're going to have torrential rains. You're going to see. So a lot of the predictions that she said, and it astounded me because my mom, the highest education she really had was a sophomore in high school. And that's because my mother come from a family of 5, but was an orphanage at the age of 12 because my grandmother contracted TB. My uncle had pneumonia, and my auntie passed away from being bit by a rat. So my mother was alone at the age of 12, outside of what her father's side, her paternal side of her family. But when you know, most girls, most family connects with the maternal side of them. So she was in the office because my grandfather had to work. She was in there until she was like 13 years old. And then she moved to California, then she went back to New Orleans. My mother was actually born in New Orleans. And she was not too far from, anyone ever heard of Council Alley in New Orleans? It's where all the petrochemical companies is located in New Orleans, right off the riverbank. She grew up in that area. But never would she have known that she would come to Chicago and become the mother of environmental justice, fighting for many of the actions that is going on. But she was able to connect with those folks in New Orleans because that was also her hometown. So to say all that, and to be a mother of 7 kids, and to learn about the environment, I used to always ask her, well, how do you know about all these things? How do you know these was going to be some of the impact? I said, where do you get this information? She said, I may not have the education, I may not have the training in, but I got the mother with to know the difference that this is wrong. And I'm going to follow what my heart tells me what is wrong and try to fight to make it right. I may not have the answers, but she said, I'm for sure I'm going to find somebody that could give me some answer to what is going on. If they can't give me no answers, then they must have to make changes to it. So to follow her motto, that's the same thing that I do. I may not have, but I do have college. I do have college experience, but I don't have all the scientific background like it's required for a lot of this. But it's not about that, because one of the things that we as people here, we have a commonality. And that commonality is nobody want to breathe bad air. Nobody want to drink contaminated water. And nobody want to live on land that is contaminated and unsafe where we're going to raise our family. And nobody want to work in an environment that is not safe. But we have to be the game changers of this. And the technology wasn't there back in the 60s and the 70s, but today we got better technology, we got better engineers, we got more people that want to be involved because they understand that this is about our future existence. And if we don't affect change to that, then we're not going to be here, because Mother Nature, as my mother used to say, Mother Nature has a way to change it. Things that we have did wrong, and if we don't get it right, she could wipe it out and start it all over. We some powerful women, ain't we, women up in here? Mother Earth don't play, so we have to respect that. We have to respect that as individuals. We got to come up with better technology. We got to learn how not to use things that's not necessary. And we got to stop producing so many chemicals. You know, we got the natural elements, and if we can make better products out of the natural elements, it's the artificial ones that we creating every day. So as you know, as I understand of the American Chemical Society, they can be good players, but their history has always been bad, because we are living in the time where all the chemicals that they produce have had a negative impact on our environment, on our ecology, and everything else. Now they're trying to get it right. They're coming up with what they call green chemistry. But it's up to you young folks up in here to make that change and affect change to have a better way, because you're fighting for your future family and your future extended family. And that's how serious it is today. And that's why I care a whole lot about it. And you know, I'm not to say that I can stand up here and be honest with anyone up in here and say I'm 100% environmentalist. No, I only know one person. His name is Ken Dunn. and he runs the resource center in the city of Chicago because he recycles everything. He, you know, if he spit out a little bit, I'm just joking, he know how to recycle that back right quick. That's how excellent he was, and that's how he thinks, and we need people to think like that, but we also need people to take his thought and move it a little bit farther, because he older than I am. Not that I got anything against us getting aging, you know, but the reality is you guys are the creators. You are our future. We fought to get to the point. I remember the time there wasn't environmental law. It was not environmental education in our institutions. We see it today. But you got to be that driving force. And one of the things that my mother always believed in, she wanted young people to get involved because she understands that it was your future. I just wish she was here. She died January 12, 2011. So it'll be 9 years and 2 more months. But that action that happened this past summer in Washington, D.C., y'all young people called it out. So now we got to move and make those our policies. Let's come up with better policies and practice and standards to effect the change that is needed. And if our elected official doesn't get it, because they're ultimately the ones that make the decision that what happens in our communities, what industry stays in our community, what standards do these companies operate from. And just like I said, this pollution is boundary. You know, it goes up, it affects our food chain and everything. So we have to come up with a better simplistic way and fight for the commonality that we all have to make this planet a better planet, because if we don't, then we won't be here to tell this story as I'm able to tell this story that we've been telling for 40 years. 40 years is a long time to fight for environmental justice and just to get to the point that where we are today. But it's okay, because time is our essence. And if we don't continue it, then where would we be? And that's the ultimate question. So in the work that I'm, as executive director of PCR, People for Community Recovery, I'm moving towards solution-oriented. I'm trying to make my community a solar community. I'm trying to make my community a renewable energy community, to take some of all the slag and process that to something that could produce energy, using the Little Calumet River in our area. We got 19 miles of waterway, 11 miles of it is unfit for human consumption and recreation. Then let's use that to produce energy, to heat up our homes. You know, some kind of way, because they said that they would never be able to dredge and clean up the Little Calumet River because of the barges that still come down, carrying our waste, carrying our chemicals, carrying abundance of things. We have to change that. But we can utilize that water to be able to do something different in our community. We have enough space in our area to support community solar farm, to support wind turbines in our community. So we're looking at how can we get public housing to be able to be, in Allgale, to be that leader and that example for the country. And I was astounded to hear that Senator Sanders and a couple of representatives came up with the Green New Deal for public housing. I said, that's awesome, because that's what we've been fighting for the very longest time, is to be able to retrofit and make our community energy efficiency, because one of the things I know for a fact that one of the biggest costs for HUD for to manage public housing is the utility costs, the gas and the light bill. So if we could reduce that and create ways that through an equity lens, those residuals will come back to sustain the community, to create programs for our young people in our community, to give them hope and opportunities in this country, because right now, kids in urban communities, kids living in public housing, they are hopeless because they have no future, because the resources that is needed for the community to sustain the community has been taken away. And it has not been driven by the parents, because we became such a transit society. Everybody only live two places. Only live somewhere 2 years and then leave and move to someone else. I decided to stay. I raised my two kids. They 34 and 32, I think. And my granddaughter is 13. I know her age because she used to be on my left hip. Now she's not even on my hip. She don't even got time for me anymore. So I understand that. You know, she's 13 years old, so I get it. But I'm just saying that now that we have to make the change, we have to affect those opportunities that come in our neighborhood, because I lived in this neighborhood, and I'm proud to say it, because I have two dogs now, and I have a Lala and the Snuggles. And I was walking early this year, I was walking them, and it just dawned onto me, because I never thought about it, that I lived in the same community for 57 years. I don't even know what it's like to live somewhere else. And I made the conscious decision then. I said, well, hell, I've been out here 57 years, and I'm only 58. I might as well stay here for the rest of my golden years and continue to fight, to continue to be engaged in my community, because that's my community. So if anybody want to post a child for sustainability in one neighborhood, here I am, you know. And I'm happy to say it, because I don't look at my housing as subsidized housing, because it's affordable housing. It just so happened that we call it public housing. But you'd be surprised how much people pay rent just to live in public housing today. And it's not cheap. It's not cheap. Me and a couple more people pay over $1,000 a month just to live in public housing. But the perception is that we're government dependent, we're lazy, we don't want to do anything. That is not so true. You know, we're looking at it from a financial, economic, yeah, we probably don't make a lot of money. But one of the things that I love about my particular community, I ain't never had to pay for a babysitter. Never in my life. And how can you value that today? And when I look at how much people have to pay for child care just in 1 week, I don't think I ever paid in a whole year. You know, but it's important. Our babies are our future. And they must be safe, and they must be protected, and they must be free from any kind of harm that would impact them environmentally, because as a result of something, and being lead poison, living in a house that is mold infested. You know, those things we can change as human beings. Because if you really look at the environmental issue, it's intersect everything in our life. It's about health, it's about housing, it's about our food system, it's about education, it's about training, you know, so, and it's about our right to breathe, our workplaces, but we don't look at it in that fashion. So I say the environmental justice, environmental issue is our umbrella. And these are the spokes. And any one of those spokes are compromised, then our environment is going to be compromised. And that's the way that we need to look at everything. What is our umbrella, and what is the spokes that we're negatively impacted? And how can we change that? So we need scientists. We need sociologists. We need healthcare people. We need engineers. We just need a new way of thinking than what we used to think about in the past. And let's try to change that. I know we can't. I'm not expecting all of y'all to go out there and change everything today. But take one step at a time and be committed in what you believe in. Like I don't like being wasteful as much as possible. You know, I like recycling. We've been recycling in our community for nearly 25 years. And that's a good thing. And just in the last administration, they taken away, so we trying to fight it to bring back the contract to give to the Resource Center to continue to recycle some of the recyclable things that we can have. So I thank you. So wait, a lot of the training, we're doing renewable energy. We also do environmental training too. We do lead, we do asbestos, we do underground storage tanks. Because just as I said, we got 250 leaking underground storage tanks that has not been addressed in the last 20 years. So we want to be able to train people, because one of the things that I tell people all the time, we know how to dirty up this country, but we don't have the infrastructure to clean it up. So our goal at our organization is to create that environmental remediation workforce to be able to clean up the sector of how do we be prepared for it. Even emergency preparedness is a serious situation, considering what was going on along the shores of our waters. So we have to learn how to have communities to be prepared. So again, I can sit up here and talk all day, but I'm open up to questions, and I thank you. Have a question?
I do. I was wondering, so you mentioned these various companies, the chemical companies and some other companies around that create this pollution.
Mm-hmm.
Would you care to name names?
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
Okay, one of the, his question is, what are some of the polluters in my community? One of the main polluters in two of the main polluters in our community is Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company.
Ford Motor.
Yeah, because it's the process of what the biggest problem, chemical problem at their place as far as the emission is the sulfur something. I forget, because I'm talking about it, I can't think about it, but it's what they use in their dipping process to keep the paint on their cars. They said they need this sulfur. Oh, I can't think of it. Potassium sulfur something that they use as a dipping model when they dip their paint to keep the rust and keep the paint from peeling. And that smell is very caustic in our community, and it seems like they only do it in the evening time. And then we got the Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. That's the water treatment facility that all the industry in our community discharges to. And what it is, and also it takes everything that come out our sewers and our drain, and we have, I forgot how many acres of sludge beds in our community. So when they lay out the sludge to release some of the chemicals from it, to dry it out, you know, it's unbearable to smell. So those are two of the big companies, but we also got ChemClean, who processes chemicals. In the past, we used to have Waste Management, who run the PCB incinerator, and we fought and got that closed because of a lot of violations and 2 explosions that happened there. We have Waste Management that's still there, and we got a couple of more steel mills. Anchor Militant is one of the steel mills that's still out there, and we're making sure that they are in compliance with their permits and stuff that they get from the government. So. Now, in the past, I can go back and think about the city used to operate. As I said here, the city used to operate 3 incinerators in our areas. Then you got Waste Management. Waste Management was one of the first regulated landfill in our community, but but we had many more prior to them they just became the first regulated with a leachate collection system. Then we got Land Lakes landfill. But in Cook County, there's a state law that says any county that has over 2 million people, there's no new landfill or no new expansion of landfills in the area. Go ahead. Say that again. they come into compliance because they get cited, they get fined for the being out of compliance, right? But who determines how much pollution is pollution? You know what I mean? You know, so that's the scary part. We're not saying that we want to close down a facility. We just want you to use the best available technology that you can use. And if it takes for you to do some conversion on site to use that technology, then use that technology, because it's only going to sustain you for the future, because you cannot continue to operate in the same fashion. We're not trying to close down the industry. We're just trying to make them be in better performance and then be more protected of the communities around them, and most importantly, their workforce.
I'm wondering if you could say something about the kind of tactics that you use. I'm sure there's a whole variety of different instances. But other than that, I also wanted to mention that locally there is a problem at Fifth and Hill in the North End. There was a coal gasification plant, and the Afro-American Cultural Center next Thursday is hosting a teach-in about supposed remediation by the power company.
Well, one of the things that in our early days of organizing an action campaign, we partnered with Greenpeace International, because they are progressive in the way that they do tactics. They climb on poles, they climb mountains. They taught my mother to put on a disposable diaper, to change herself to a truck. But we also do petition drives. We also pressure our elected official to host public hearings in our community. We also try to work with policymakers to come up with different laws and advocate that. As you could know, we was part of the whole FEJA, the Future Energy Job Act, that passed in the state of Illinois, that says that 50% of the goal is to achieve 50% of renewable energy, and to be able to work with communities that has been impacted. So we label them as low-income community and EJ community, and the return entry folks, to give them the opportunity in there. But it's a whole lot around, you know, because it was built around allowing the nuclear plants to stay around for a couple of more years, but they had to also support the education and the training into renewable energy, which ComEd had took up a big lead in the city of Chicago and making sure that that happened. So a lot of actions. We would chain ourselves to doors. We would bird call. We would do a lot of things that is necessary. And I can't really say that I'm the one. A lot of my organizers that work with PCR is the one that come up with these many action plans that they do. I just go around just telling the story. That's what I'm good at. Oh, we got someone back here? Sure.
Hi, my name is Beth. At the same time that poor folks, people of color, people with disabilities are the first line of people to be impacted
Yes.
by environmental issues, at that same time, environmentalism can have it looks like a white issue. And I think part of it has to do with white liberals talking like they know what's right and what's going on, even when they're not at the front lines. And so I'm wondering, in your experience, what are when you're, reaching out to people around what's important, what are the messagings that you have found that connect with people, and what is the type of messaging that people are like, look, I don't want to talk to you because I don't want to hang out with, the snooty white people, whatever. See what I'm asking?
What we have learned has been real effective for us is connecting it personal to individuals. Let's take lead for an example. Lead-based paint, lead poisoning issue. We was able to, everyone care about their health and what affect our children, for an example. And when we had lead-based paint in our community, we educated the resident about the danger of this lead-based paint in our community and what it does to our children, and once it gets exposed into the spinal cord, it creates these learning disabilities that you can never eradicate, right? Okay? But we also looked at it from an economic side of it, because we know that these contaminants is in our community, so how are we going to clean it out? So you needed that workforce. So what we was able to do, We was the first grassroots group in the country that brought technical training down to the community and taught residents how to become lead abatement workers. And they was the first to get those jobs in the abatement of the housing, of removing that lead-based paint. And what I loved about it, because it has so many connections to it, is that they made sure they did it right. It was okay, you know, for one thing, they protecting the family's health. Second, they making money. And thirdly, they want to make sure that it doesn't come back. So we're going to clean, because we don't have a real true definition of how you determine what's clean is clean. But with lead-based paint, if you can go and abate it all the way down to its first layer of paint and use all the protected, personal protective gear, use all the equipment that were tested to make sure that it's out of that particular apartment, then you know you created a lead-safe house. And we did that also when we learned that we had asbestos in our community. And with the floor tile and the installation around we made sure that the residents was protected, the resident was relocated, and the residents returned back to a house that was tested, tested negative for any asbestos fibers in it. So we created environmental safe housing. So we have to learn, and all this is personal. It's just trying to find the means and the ways to make it, to connect to the people who are mostly negatively impacted, because a lot of times, I hate to say it, but we say we in survival mode. But when it comes to affecting your family's health and something that is making your kids sick, then you'll be more engaged. We even do pollution log against the Water Reclamation District in the summer, and sometime next month, we're going to present it to them and say, this is what your summer was like. So what is your goal next summer to reduce those emissions, to lower the emissions that coming from your site, from your facility with the sludge beds, for an example. So that's the way that we have to get creative in teaching them. When I work with the environmental groups, it's all about infiltrating. I hate to use that word, but it's infiltrating to change their minds so they become allies. Today they are allies. We work well with the Sierra Club. We work well with the National Environmental Defense Fund. We work with them because they get resources that we need, and they can also make our campaign go a little bit farther than what it is, because they already got to connect it with the elected officials. They know how to do all the policy work that we as grassroots groups that don't know how to do. So yeah, so it's working because we all, there's no separatism in this stuff. As long as it's separated, then we're not going to see it collectively. We got to attack the housing, the poor housing standards, because sick and brand new houses make people sick. Because the off gases from the new material that's put into, because we're using different types of material, is making people sick. So it's the education and the willingness for us to come together as a common good to say that we're going to protect our environment, and that means that it's going to protect our ecology, it's going to protect Mother Earth. So, so it's never a cut and dry situation. There's so many different ways that we need we need students to come out and be as intern and pair up with a resident who wants to learn this stuff, or to teach younger people that, this is what you have to do to inspire them to come back to school and become, disciplined in that area. So it's just about being the creativity within the organizations of what's going to sustain us, and seeing it and bringing and looking at it from an intersectionality instead of just one particular target.
I'm familiar with another case in the Chicago area where a large company was somehow forced or chose to do a cleanup, and that was near Oak Park. There was a park, a town park, where they found coal tar, and that had previously been a dump site for ComEd, the electric company.
Mm-hmm.
And ComEd came in, and they had a 2-year project. It must have cost $1 million they put over the site while they dug it up. I mean, an entire city park. So I'm wondering, why was ComEd forced or interested in doing this cleanup, and the companies you're dealing with are not cleaning up your neighborhood? Do you know about that case? And do you have any?
Well, you know what, ComEd, you know, it's variable about ComEd, because at one hand, ComEd, when they decommissioned all the electrical transformers and they had PCB oils in it, instead of doing the right disposal practice, they got with management in my neighborhood and created and dug a hole in the ground and threw tons of drums of PCBs in our community and buried it, because it was like a storage site for us. It was like 20-some years before we really know that that's what's the practice. And they tried 3 times to clean it up. We made sure on the 4th time that, and it's not even saying that it's clear. It's not saying that it's clean, because I tell, in that particular PCB contamination we had in our neighborhood, I was said, I am not the same size that this, when you dumped it. I was a little girl when you dumped those contaminants in there, and I'm not 20 pounds anymore. You know, I'm 200-something plus pounds. So if I'd expanded, then the expanded of that area had expanded all, and you should test where there's no detection of PCP. But that didn't happen with that cleanup of it, and that was a $20 million cleanup. So to say about ComEd, yes, they are making some of the areas clean up some of the sites, because now they are trying to we're trying to revitalize the area and to repurpose the area. So it's not going to happen on a mass scale, but a majority of all the steel mills that closed in our area, they have been demolished. Now those areas need to be cleaned up. But then again, are they going to clean it up just to industrial standard? It all depends, because if you realize most steel mills was close to waterways. And one of the biggest steel mill in our area, they trying to make that a mixed-use development, where they want to have houses and commercials. And so how do you determine how clean that is? You know, that's the whole, I say it should never be residential on that, residential housing on there. Because you're going from an industrial standards to a residential standard. I don't think they cleaned it up to that safe level. And you should not allow nobody who wants to raise a family there to be living there. So it's hard, you know, and most of the time you are absolutely correct. Communities like mine may not get cleaned up faster than what another development there, considering what the socioeconomic standards of that community tend to get cleaned up. We're learning that a lot of the stuff that was located, a lot of the industry is located on the north side, is coming to the south side, and we try to fight those developments. So, but we're not against industry. We're not against development, though. We just want safe industry to the best of their ability in our neighborhood. And that's all we can ask for, because we as consumers, we demand these things, and we demand these products because of what we use and depend on every day. Yes?
What advice would you give younger generations who are interested in community activism and social justice and environmental justice?
Oh, you seen a spurge of that today. You know, because they connected with it, because at least one of every kid who into the activism for environmental justice know a kid with asthma. Seen a kid go into an asthmatic episode where you cannot breathe because it has something to do with the air, or it has something to do with what you've been exposed to your house. They get it more than what my age group would ever get it. You know, so, but it's still, the education must be in the community that mostly negatively impacted, and it's not. So you see the organizing come from more of the affluent schools, the more well-prepared schools, because the schools in my neighborhood is struggling just to keep basic materials to teach the kids. So we have to learn how to get, like, university to adopt a school in disadvantaged neighborhood and educating into, because you see all these creative minds in school. It's just that they're not exposed to it or how to help them redirect their thinking to become action in a positive way instead of some of them responding into a negative way. So that's what I'm saying, that sometimes, you know, we're thinking this box, we got to think outside the box, and how can we include it, and what little bit we're going to do to affect change or to inspire somebody to affect change. Because we all in this together, and there's no separatism and none of this stuff, because that's why we at the state of mind of where we are today, because we're not working collectively. But I see it coming, because at one point, environmental issues was not part of a conversation that's not on the table. Now it's in our academic institution, in a full force way than what I ever seen in the last 30 years I've been doing this work. Yes. Well, one of the things that I have seen with the elected officials in my community, because to get them engaged, they're more concerned about the end result of how many jobs it's going to create. Because if the number of jobs it create for his constituents, guess what? It makes him look good to his constituents. But when so we don't come with an empathetic position with them. We come with them with facts and information about and research that has been done for them to support it. And if they don't support it, then we are learning how to create report cards. There's the Illinois Environmental Council who create report cards about the way that our elected officials speak, right? And we use those report cards to organize, to tell our, so now in our community, we're working more, having more our elected officials come to the community and tell us what you're doing, and we'll have that report card in our hand and say, well, this is how you voted on this and this for the environment, so it's almost like an indirect pressure action, because the politicians don't look at me and you as an individual. They look at me and you as knowing at least 10 people. And that's important for us to capitalize on that.
I want to thank Cheryl for being amazing.
Thank you.